Hello and welcome to Challenge to Build. In today's review video, I will be taking a look at the ArcCaptain MIG200. I do want to thank ArcCaptain for sending me the MIG welder in order to do this review on. In the past, I have reviewed other equipment from them. This is their TIG 200 along with their Cut 50 plasma cutter. And me personally, I have been very impressed with the performance of their equipment for the budget-friendly pricing. And the MIG200 still, in my classification of a budget machine, falls within that category. Now, when I use the word budget-friendly or budget equipment, for me personally, that's anything in the range of about $500 or less. Now, the ArcCaptain MIG200 definitely pushes the limit. It's right up there at the top of that budget. However, it can still be had for a great price. So I am looking forward to seeing what kind of performance this has in this video. Now, the purpose of this video is not to teach you how to weld. This is intended to give you an overview of this machine, go over the basic setup functions of it, strictly in the MIG process. This is actually a stick, lift arc TIG, and MIG welding machine. You are going to need to spend some time reading the user manual, so this way here you can become more familiar with using the machine. And I would highly recommend reading it because in the back of the manual, it's not even just a user manual. It will actually teach you some basic principles of welding in different processes. So there's a lot of information in this book as you page through, talking about torch angles, speeds, wire speeds, voltage, all kinds of things. So take a couple of minutes after you get your machine prior to setting it up and read through the instruction manual. Now, ArcCaptain gives you everything that you need in order to weld with flux cord wire right out of the box, including the MIG welding torch whip, the stinger for stick welding, obviously the ground cable. They give you a spare bag of extra parts, different rollers, gas nozzles, the actual nozzle adapter, along with a couple different tips and just a quick little change-out tool. For this purpose and this review, I am actually going to weld with flux cord wire using 110 volts. And the reason I am doing this is, as I have done some reviews in the past, I am trying to give you, the buyer or viewer, the best possible information. And even though I do a lot of welding on 220 volts using solid wire and shielding gas, a lot of the feedback that I've gotten on some of my videos, it seems like most beginner welders are buying the welders and then trying to weld with flux core using 110 volts. So that is how I'm going to set up the initial part of this review. What I will do is at the end of the video and at the end of the review, I will put in a clip of me welding with shielding gas and 220 volts using solid wire for anybody that wants to see the performance of this welder after the initial review. So that is going to kind of be how this is going to go over the next couple of minutes. With that being said, ArcCaptain does give you the shielding gas hose to hook up the back of the machine here to the shielding gas. However, if you want to weld with solid wire and shielding gas, you will need to supply and purchase your own regulator. So keep that in mind as I go through this video as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up the welding torch and the ground cable. The way that you hook this up is going to determine whether you are welding with flux core wire or solid wire with shielding gas, because the polarities in how these get hooked up are different. And again, says it in here. Also, when you flip down the main panel of the welder, ArcCaptain gives you a quick setup guide right here, and it says changing polarity. So it's pretty easy and hard to miss, but it says DCEN for no gas or DCEP for gas. You can see up here on the front of the machine, positive, negative. So the ground cable actually goes into the positive lug. This is considered to be the Euro style connector. All of the connection points as far as gas, where the wire goes in, and then obviously the electrics for the trigger are in one hookup. And the first thing you got to do is remove the cap. And it can only go on one way, so carefully insert it and then screw the threads. You will notice that I have one cable that is still not yet connected, and this will go to the open positive lug of the machine here. Again, reading the user manual will help you set this up properly for whatever process welding you are going to do. There is a Cannon plug right here on the front of the machine, and this will allow you to install a spool gun for if you want to get involved in welding aluminum or even steel with the spool gun. But that also too is an additional add-on, but it is nice to see that they have it ready to go for that application. Now, one of the last things I have to do is install the spool of wire into the machine. This will handle up to an 11-pound spool, and actually the machine is already set up to handle the larger spools. So I actually have to take off the spool that is on the adapter spool that is on this, so that way I can use my small 2-pound spool of flux cord wire. For the purpose of the initial review and the welding on 110 volts using flux core, I am going to use 0.030 flux cord wire, and in order to install it, you have to remove the spool adapter. And so you want to make sure that the wire comes off underneath the spool. So I will put it back on there. Do that. There we go. Another thing I'm going to do while I'm in here is replace the drive wheel on the motor. There are extra drive rollers in the bag. So again, using the setup guide right here that's on the plate, the side door of the welder, it will tell you exactly what groove roller you need to use, whether it's a V-groove or a knurled roller. And I kind of wrote down in my cheat sheet here the wire diameters for 0.6 is approximately 023, 0.8 is 030, 0.9 is 035, and then 1.0 is 0.040. So for the purpose of this welding demonstration, I'm using 0.8, which coincides with 030. So I need to look for the knurled rollers. On this side, put the 0.8 facing in. It can only go on one way. And then reinstall the retaining thumb screw. The spool unwinds from underneath and goes into the liner. Tighten the adjustment wheel. Make sure there's tension on the wire. And now finally for the first turn on of the machine. So here we go. LCD screen is nice and clear with all of the display options. We'll get into this here more in depth in just a minute. The fan cycles off, and now let's see here. There it is. We will trim a little of the excess. Cover it back up with the nozzle. And now we are ready to weld. But before I weld, I'm going to come up here, I'll zoom into the control panel, and I will go over some of the basic functions and the display features of the machine, push a couple buttons, turn a couple knobs, figure out how it works, and then finally strike an arc. All right, so before we get into welding, I'm going to do my best to clearly and quickly go through some of the features that are within this machine. And while this looks a little daunting and overwhelming, over time, with using the machine, you will learn what these buttons do and how to properly set the machine for your welding process. And starting with this little LCD screen here, you can see that it already is set into the MIG welding mode. But in order to change this, you hit the mode button and you can select from stick welding, TIG welding, MIG welding with a spool gun, or going back to MIG. Primarily, I will use this as a MIG welder. So that is pretty much how it's going to stay set. We have our voltage here, which we have adjustment with the voltage knob here. We have the wire speed here, so we can adjust our wire speed up and down. The third knob is the inductance, so we can raise and lower our inductance depending on the metal and the thicknesses that we are welding. Over here we have the synergic button. This has the capabilities to be a synergic welder, and basically all that is software within the welder to kind of automate the selection of voltage and amperage, or excuse me, wire speed, depending on material thickness, and that can be found in this quick start guide here on the side. Because you can then adjust, well, this will allow you to adjust the voltage, fine-tune the voltage up and down depending on the material thickness. Same thing with the amperage. And as you can see in the synergic mode, if you mess with the amperage or the wire speed, you can see that the voltage change is trying to stay somewhat, I guess you could say, parallel automatically with whatever you are selecting. Now this here is the button to switch from 2T to 4T. You can see these two little arrows. That is set up for the 2T touch option. That is pushing the trigger, holding it, making your weld, and then releasing the trigger when you are finished. 4T is pushing the trigger, releasing, welding when you get to the end, pushing and releasing again to stop the weld. And then one more time, this also has the ability to have a spot welding timer in it. So you can push the trigger and then the spot welding time will be determined by the seconds in the parameters. So you can change it depending on how fast or how slow you want your spot welds to happen. I have never had the opportunity to have a spot weld timer within a welder, so it will be interesting to see how that works. In the synergic mode, you can also select the material in which you are using to weld. It was already set to flux, but it has CRNI, which is going to be for stainless steel. It is a mix of 98% carbon dioxide and 2% ER308. Aluminum magnesium alloy, AR 100%, so that's 100% argon. CO2, carbon dioxide, 100% for ER50S and ER70S6 wire. So that's going to be your solid wire with 100% CO. Then we go down into the mix, which right now I am running a mix of 75%, 25% shielding gas. Another neat feature about this machine is it has memory slots, up to 10 memory slots for welding parameters when you are welding and dialing in the machine. So if I adjust this in any way and then don't touch it for 20 seconds, what that does is it comes and puts it into a memory slot on the LCD screen here. Then you can select, if you remember doing something that you need to go back to, you can hit the memory slot and then select whatever parameter you have saved, and it can hold up to 10 memory slots. So that's a neat feature. Again, it's going to take time to absorb all of this and just time under the hood using the machine to learn what this is capable of doing. And if that wasn't enough, and if that didn't confuse you, there's one more thing that I need to show you. That requires me to turn off the machine for a second. And there is a delay from turning off the machine to when everything shuts down. Now that the machine is shut down, I can go into some factory presets for internal parameters on this. And in order to do that, you push and hold the mode selection here, and then push and hold while turning on the machine. And then you wait for this little LCD screen to kick over to a P1. And now I am into the internal parameters, and they are P1 all the way up to P6. Now, P1 is like a factory reset. If you get in here and you mess something up and you need to go back to a factory reset, all you do is turn this knob to 1 and then hit this button here, and it goes back to factory presets. Parameter 2 is welding time calculation. This is going to tell you how much time you've spent welding for the day. Now, I don't know if this has to do with the machine being left on, or if it calculates, however many times you turn it on and off during the day. I'm not sure. We're going to learn. Parameter number 3 is burn back time at MIG welding. This is adjustable from 0 to 400 milliseconds. Parameter 4 is burn back voltage, again with MIG welding, and this is adjustable from 10 to 18 volts. Parameter 5 is pre-flow for the gas when MIG welding, of course with shielding gas. It doesn't really apply for flux core, but you can adjust it from 0 to 300 milliseconds. And then P6 is post-flow, adjustable from 0 to 2 seconds. So again, not applicable for flux core, which is what we're doing, but a lot of adjustability within this machine. And again, it will just all take time to learn and absorb this to figure out what's going to work best for you. Well, unfortunately, if you haven't guessed, I was doing some welding with the machine for the first initial test run, and obviously my microphone and all of the things that were related to the video weren't working, other than the video that you're watching right now. But my very first weld is right here, followed by the second weld, then a series of welds on this plate. And overall, the machine is running very smoothly. I personally do not do a lot of flux cord welding. This is probably the only, I could probably count on one hand in the last 20 years how many times I've flux cord welded. So, like I said in the earlier in the video, is I'm trying to tailor this review around what my feedback has been on prior videos with the welders. And it seems like flux core welding on 110 volts is the way to go. So what I'm going to do is weld one more test. I'm going to just go ahead and, actually, you know what I might do? I think I might butt weld this 2x3, leaving about a 1/16 inch gap as like a root. Almost sounds like I'm running too fast. Bring that down. I'm liking it. All right, now what I'm going to do is try to weld some 16 gauge. 16, we'll do 16.4 as a start. So, and I'm still not using the synergic mode. Right now I'm just manually setting this to get a feel for the machine. And I'll run a T-joint, I'll tack it, and then run a weld. So far, so good. running too hot. I'm blowing holes in it. See what that does. Still blowing holes. Let's turn up the speed. It's getting better. So this just goes to show you that it just takes time. You just got to practice, fine tune. What I can say is what I'm seeing with this machine is very small increments. You know, 0.1, 0.2 increments on the dials, because rather than inches per minute, this is in meters a minute. So 4.5 meters is a lot of wire speed, I feel like. So it's not millimeters, it says meters, M minutes. So again, metric conversions to the standard stuff. It's going to take time to learn. You can see on the back I'm getting penetration. And I mean, overall, it's very simple to use. Fine movements on the dials and the buttons, and with time, you will be able to weld really, really well. Well, that is how I'm going to wrap up the initial review and setup for the ArcCaptain MIG200. Hopefully you were able to learn something within this review and video. One thing I am noticing with this specific machine is in the adjustments, very fine adjustments within, once you kind of get it close to where you need it to have it set, to fine tune it, just kind of dial it in ever so slightly, because especially with the wire speed, you can change the speed of it pretty rapidly just by a couple clicks on the knob. So other than that, the machine is definitely a solid welder. It is producing very good welds with very little effort. And like I said plenty of times within this video, you know, I've had to learn how to flux core weld on top of learning a new machine. So that is another reason why I like to do the reviews the way I do, because it kind of brings me in cold turkey, and it shows basically how anybody can take it from the box and start producing some welds. Just like anything else, it's going to take time and experience to learn the machine and dial it in to start producing some really good welds. But that is basically the end of the video. I want to thank you for watching. Now all that you have to do is get out there and challenge your build. If you are really interested to see what this thing does with MIG welding, I am going to hook it up to my shielding gas, switch over the wire, and continue practicing with this machine. So if that's something that you want to watch, stay tuned. If not, thanks again for watching, and I will see you in an upcoming review and/or video. Well, if you're still watching from the review, I want to thank you for hanging out with me just a little bit longer. I went through the switch over to MIG welding with the shielding gas. I installed my regulator. I switched over the wire. I am using 030 solid wire now. Remember from the review, you will have to buy a regulator separately with this machine if you want to MIG weld with shielding gas. What I'm going to do is, previously in the review, I did all of my welding not using the synergic mode. I am going to MIG weld with that mode now. So new learning curve, but let's see, MIG, synergic. I'm using mixed gas, two-touch, syn. Oh, one last thing I got to do is I got to switch over the polarities. So I'm going to shut this off for a second. I did forget to do that, but that's why we like these little setup guides down here. Just because I flip down the door, it made me remember. So DCEP is what I need. So this goes back to basically like a traditional grounding where the ground goes on the negative. And we switch. Negative, positive. We should be good there. I'm going to verify. Yes, we are good. So let's start at 20 and see what this does at 20. All right, here goes nothing. MIG, ArcCaptain MIG200, welding 1/8 inch flat plate. Using shielding gas, take 1. Whew. Also, we are using 220 voltage too, so I switched it over to 220 voltage, and with my tack welds, that is already flowing beautifully. So let's run a weld. Wow, it's almost too fast. I feel like I could slow it down a little bit. That did it. We're getting there. Let's turn up the inductance and see what happens. I'll run the other way now. Whew. Pretty work. Pretty work. 220 voltage, the way to go. With the gas. And synergic. Very nice. Very nice. Now I'm going to switch over to some 3/16. I'm going to crank it up even more. So I'm going to max it out to 3/16. I'm going to run at 25 volts and see what happens. It's probably a little too hot, but we're going to find out. Dang. I like that. I like that a lot. Flip her around and do it again. Whew. Very, very impressive. Just buy it. It's beautiful. Simulate a little frame weld, I guess. This is back to 1/8 inch, so I'm going to drop it down quite a bit. I'm going to come back down to about 19. Let's run this, we'll run a down pass. I love welding, even if it's dumb stuff like this. It's very, very satisfying. I don't know what else you need to see. If you are looking to get a welder, ArcCaptain MIG200's got you covered. If you are a beginner welder, I highly recommend 220 voltage and some shielding gas. You will be extremely, extremely happy. It will take practice, but you'll get it. The machine's making it look way too easy. So that's going to do it for me. Again, thanks for watching. Get out there, go challenge your build. Buy yourself an ArcCaptain MIG200. I'll see you in the next video.